Welcome to another episode of Doomer Optimism. First time guest, first time host Simon Ingle, and I have with me AC and Kara. You want to introduce yourselves?
Sure, AC or Anarcho-Contrarian, many time co-host, many time guest. So it's been a while though. It's been a hiatus, so good to be back.
And I'm Kara. Tweet under Kara98. And I have been a co-host once, but never a guest. But it's an honor and a pleasure to be able to be here to talk to you tonight.
Yeah, so we're here today to talk about community and building community within our own little villages, but maybe not community specifically around religion or religious places. So I want to talk today about how we've built community ourselves. AC, do you want to start us off with what you've tried so far?
Sure, yeah. I was thinking we could maybe talk a little bit about our, sort of backgrounds to the extent that it feeds into the conversation. So, folks have heard me tell my story before. I think it was the Grandpa Stories episode with Nate and Josh way back when. But so I grew up on a dairy farm in New Hampshire, and I was part of the fourth generation on the farm. So my grandparents came over here from Europe in the 50s, and they helped some distant relatives, which were effectively like my great grandparents, not by blood, but by relations. So they helped them start up a dairy farm in central New Hampshire. And my grandparents had my mother and my uncles. And when my mother and my uncles got married, my grandparents gifted them land adjacent to the farm. And so, when I grew up, it was, my house, my uncle and aunt's house, my grandparents on the farm, on the other side of the farm, my other aunts and uncles, my paternal grandparents had moved in by the time I was sort of in my middle childhood, I guess, if you will. And so, I had the benefit of, being born into obviously a multi-generational situation, but, given the small town life, it was about 1,000 people, give or take, and by far I think the farm was the biggest business in town, and certainly one of the biggest property holders, and it was sort of a natural congregation place. Like when we were kids, we used to go to field trips at our farm, which was always a little funny. And naturally, a lot of the community would contribute to the farm in different ways. In the summertime, haying was a big deal. There'd be lots of folks from town that would help out with haying. And so I was just the lucky beneficiary of a tremendous amount of social capital, and just the many generations in place. There was a lot of community bonds there. So that's kind of how I grew up really quickly in a nutshell. And then I was the first in my family to go off to college. And when I did that, I met my future wife, who was not from New Hampshire. I landed a good job in a small New England city, and I've been there ever since. So, very small rural upbringing, and I'm currently in a very neighborhood sort of quasi-urban environment now. The neighborhood that we live in is, if you've ever been to like a Cambridge, Massachusetts, it has that sort of feel, like single family homes, two family homes, maybe triple deckers, very walkable neighborhood, walk to parks and restaurants and libraries and the like, which was, as you can tell, like a complete 180-degree difference from, how I grew up. And it wasn't
Yeah,
really,
it's
it
really
wasn't really like
clearly.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, your story just is so it makes sense why I'm drawn so much to the Grandpa Chats
Yeah.
episode, because it's basically the exact same story of my life in a very strange way.
Cool.
Fourth
Yeah.
generation, small farm. Yeah, it's funny.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, so it wasn't really until we had kids, and certainly when COVID hit, like where we realized, where I realized like how much I had given up from a community standpoint, taking the path that I took. We had basically no community, and at the beginning of COVID, quite isolated, despite being, a literal stone's throw away from my neighbors.
Hmm.
And so that's really when we started to put in the work and say, like, we need to immerse ourselves with these folks that we're literally surrounded by. Um, and so we've done a bunch of things that hopefully we can get to, that really
Yeah.
revolve mostly around kids, which there's many of them on our block. And so that's the quick overview, sort of dipping the toe into the subject. So that's my story. I'd love to hear more of yours.
What about you, Kara? I'll save
Um,
mine till the end.
Sure.
so very, very different background and experience. So I started out life as an army brat. I was born in at Fort Polk in Louisiana, Western Louisiana. Lived 9 different places by the time I was 6. We landed in Connecticut. So my father was from Memphis, Tennessee, and my mom had grown up in Connecticut, was from Connecticut. And we landed back. My mom uh, didn't want to move on again, and my parents divorced. So grew up here with my father in Europe for a while, and then landing in Virginia and ultimately settling in Arizona. My grandparents were in, my mother's parents had moved from Connecticut to Florida, and my father's parents were in Arkansas. So very spread out, but my mom and stepdad were very involved in the community I grew up in. So suburban town in southern Shoreline, Connecticut. Um, I, went off to school, still in state, but kind of looking outwards, bounced around in my young adulthood every couple of years moving, ended up in Boston for many years in a neighborhood of Boston, very like what AC was just describing. And then um, sort of later in life married and decided that we wanted to move out of the city and come back to Connecticut. And so landed in suburban town in Connecticut and it moved literally in the middle of the pandemic. We had planned to do it before, but it just worked out that in July of 2020 we moved, and ever since this is where we're going to be and trying to become more active in the community and get to know folks and build things up.
Great. So I grew up in a suburban town next to the town that I currently live in, but it's a long journey to get back to here. My grandparents owned a U-Pick fruit and vegetable farm. It was family owned fruit and vegetable farm, and that's where I spent most of the time on the weekends, and pretty much feel like I grew up here. It's where I am now, and but I didn't stay here. I had gone to New York City for about 9 years, and then was got married, and my wife and I it just didn't fit. We had a small child, and we could not make it work. We both were working 12, 14-hour days. It just didn't really make sense to have a child in New York City. You have to have a lot of money for it to really work, I think. So we decided to move back home, and then COVID hit, and in 2021 we moved back to the farm, and I now live in my grandparents' house on the farm, fourth generation of the farm. I still do have a day job, but I spend quite a bit of time here working around the farm. And in 2015, my brother and I had started a hard cider company, and that also, with that and the child, having a baby really was what the impetus to move back here. So I live like 10 miles from where I grew up, but am not connected with the community here. It's very disconnected from the town that I grew up in. So it's definitely like starting all over again in a weird way, and having children, so it's much different now. Little kids, like you said, it's more focused on activities around kids or family. But yeah, and I think about back, and you talk about the community and the coming to the farm, and we do tours for kids, school kids too. So it's very similar. But the community, it's a lot of like knowing the customers that live in the community around you, they come to you. So a lot of times there isn't a lot of going off farm to do community activities, but that's what I feel like we need to do, and I'm trying to move towards that, or maybe even community building on the farm as well. I have some ideas we'll talk about.
Hmm. So you said that like community ties between the neighboring town where you grew up and the current town you live in are disjointed.
Yeah, it's very
Could
much like a
you?
suburban town and then like a farming town.
Okay, so
Yeah.
there's like a historical disjointedness, would you say? Like when
Mm,
you grew
it's
up,
different. Yeah, it's just different school districts. So it's
yeah.
very segregated, not segregated, but siloed, maybe is a better word for
Hmm.
it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, it's very
And
much like yeah, go ahead.
would you say like did most of the kids who grew up in the town that you grew up in take a similar path to you? In other words, did they leave as well?
Yeah, yeah, a lot of them left, and because of the high taxes, a lot of their parents would leave as well once their kids graduated. So the community definitely sort of like fell apart. It was like generational, or like the parents would leave after the kids went to college because
Hmm.
it is quite expensive here. Um, I guess I never said I'm in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
And what about the more rural town that you live in now? Is there
yeah.
much continuity in terms of people living there who grew up
Yeah,
there?
it's a lot of like family farms and like generational family farms. Like the the so and so's farm, and the grandkids or the kids have taken over the farm, whether it's a cow farm or
Mhm.
yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's tough. I mean, what would you say? What would you say your primary challenge has been to reinstilling or fostering a sense of community, given your path and where you're at now?
Yeah, it's weird because I don't know the community, so it's hard to even start to connect. It's funny, it really reared its head. My kid was in pre-K, and the teacher wouldn't give out the birthday invitations unless we had an invitation for every kid. But I didn't know the parents' names. Like I didn't know
Hmm.
who the parents were because I didn't even know the kids' last names. I didn't
Hmm.
even know who the kids were in the class. It's a weirdly disconnected thing. Yeah, I can talk about how one of the things we did, we were invited by some customers of ours. They started a they started an in a slightly neighboring town, they started an artist studio. They took an old church and turned it into like a community center. There's gonna be like a coffee shop and a space for the community to do like art related workshops. And they had invited us to a fundraiser at a local library, and that's kind of how I started to build the community. People that they had invited or people that were at the fundraiser, networking that way. And slowly, as the kids get older, you start to meet the parents too, for sure. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
But being on farm, it's kind of weird. Like I don't generally for the weekends. I spend my time here on the farm. I don't go to the local gatherings or parties that people go to. A lot of times I'm spending most of my weekend here.
Hmm. Hmm. That's what you said before, where it sounds like you need to get them to come to you. Certainly I can empathize with if farming being a more than full-time job, and in terms of, things that my folks still do, that, the farm I grew up in, my cousin is now in the process of taking it over from my aunt and uncle. And, they work all the time. I mean, they don't get a day off, especially a dairy farm is, you're beholden to milking cows twice a day.
Mm-mm.
And so they've, um, came up with a series of events that get people to come to them. So they do a few different things. They have movie nights, get it? Dairy farm movie nights. um, which is has become quite a hit because they set up like this inflatable projector screen situation, like right on the other side of the fence from the manure pit, which is kind of funny because the smells are interesting. But they have a fire pit set up, and they have people come for movie nights, and they set up a little pop tent, and they grill hot dogs and hamburgers and for sale and that sort of thing. They do an Easter egg hunt, which is a lot of fun. That's a huge event. Draws a lot of crowd. You can hide a lot of Easter eggs on a farm for sure. Um, they do like dairy. They've done dairy days in the past where they have like ice cream vendors come in, and they do samplings of their product and that sort of thing. They actually this is pretty cool. They got hooked up with a local fireworks club, believe it or not. Like, I didn't even know fireworks clubs existed. But they somehow got hooked up through friends of a friend, with a fireworks club. And now they do twice a year. They put on totally free fireworks. It's free to the farm. It's free to the people who come watch the fireworks. The fireworks folks are just happy, I guess, to like have a great big wide open space where they can do their pyro fix. But yeah, when you're on a farm, you're right. There's not a lot of free time on the weekends to go out to the community events. But to a certain extent, though, you kind of have to as well.
Yeah, I found,
There is a
yeah.
balance there, right?
Yeah, I found to try and like make a point to when we get invited to something, like we have to go. Like,
Yeah,
and make a point to like meet 5 new people, or like shake 5 new hands and get to know 5 new people. Yeah, and
yeah,
that's worked pretty well. And like volunteering to help people prune their apple trees. And um I'm a big fan of the work party method, of meeting and being friends with people. You really get to know someone and understand them better, but by working next to them, whether it's with a shovel or some pruning shears. Yeah,
yeah,
that
for sure.
works too. I've done a bunch of that this past winter.
What types of events does your community have? Like, do you know? Are there like regular community events that typically happen?
Yeah, there's some parades that happened, and I did attend a bunch of them last year. Like we have a wheat harvest parade. That was really great. That was how I met the locals who have this new art center in town. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Hmm.
I like the movie night idea. Do they have a theme for the series? Let's say like the year, the summer.
No, they try to do family friendly movies, obviously. Yeah, it's funny what you're up against, which I never would have otherwise realized. But like, they're not allowed to advertise what movie they're playing because of, like, I don't know, trademark reasons, I guess.
Yeah.
So they
Intellectual
always,
property for
yeah,
sure.
exactly. I guess when you stream movies from Netflix or something,
Yeah, you
you
can't show
can't
it to a group
take
of
credit for
people.
it. But,
That's correct.
but so that there are some nuances, I guess, to get around. But yeah, the movie nights are like super low effort. They bought this projector set up for a few $100, um, and they don't charge. They take donations for folks that want to make a donation, and again, they sell hot dogs and hamburgers and whatnot. Um,
Yeah, I was
yeah,
thinking
in
about
terms,
doing that this year.
yeah, I think that would be a
Yeah.
lot of fun. In terms of like community events, does your town have a volunteer fire department, or is it full
Yeah, it
time?
does. Yeah, it does have a
Yeah,
volunteer fire department. Yeah, and
yeah.
I know a few
Vol
people that do volunteer. Yeah.
yeah, so that would be another thing to look into. Like the volunteer fire department in the town where I grew up in is like the lifeblood of social capital, really. They have, a big chicken barbecue every year around the 4th of July. They host a huge ice fishing tournament in the wintertime. There's a lot of lakes and ponds in town. Um, and that just seems to be like an easy social network to tap into. I mean, easy. It takes work to join the fire department, of course. But there's networks there that are already built for you. You just
Hmm.
need to tap into them. Maybe that's where we can get into like other similar clubs and organizations that exist out there, like the Grange, which my mother was a part of, and Kara is now a part of. Or the Lions Club or the VFW, like those are networks that already exist, where rather than creating something from scratch, you can tap into and take advantage of. But those come with their own unique challenges as well. So I don't know if Kara, if you want to, sort of touch on your Grange experience, and speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so we've become involved in our local Grange, which, for those who don't know, is a fraternal organization that was originally has been historically quite politically active, um, but it is now sort of a fraternal organization. Um, I think it's got a long history. There are people who've been in it multi-generation, and it's designed to build community, do work. I think it's been a little harder as a newcomer to get involved in it. I think just as the you know as we're no longer really in a farming community. It's a town that's transitioned from being a farming town to a suburban town over the past 30, 40 years. And so a lot of people are like, well, it's been hard to recruit people. So we came in, the membership had been quite down, and we showed up and they're like, do you want to be officers? So my husband and I became uh, suddenly put into a leadership in a position in an organization that we haven't necessarily gotten to know well, which has been its own kind of challenge of you're trying to get to know people, don't have a lot of social capital, and suddenly you're trying to carry an organization along. But that in and of itself, just being somebody who's willing to step up, has, you know, earned us recognition for better or worse. But it's been a challenge, but it's also been interesting to try to help this organization keep going in
What are
town.
some of the activities that they put on?
So the sort of highlight is the agricultural fair. So we don't have like the big town or county fair type of thing. So we don't have rides, but you have judging of vegetables, or it's an opportunity to bake something. And that has actually been a lot of fun to organize. So it's just the agricultural exhibitions or the handcraft exhibitions, but um, that's been a lot of fun. It's a big fundraiser. Um, we also, have run a rubber duck race as a fundraiser. We do flower sales, have been involved in those sorts of sort of activities to build community and raise some money to keep the lights on in the hall.
Right.
And honestly, the hall has needed some renovation, so that's taken up some work as well. So it's been some cleanup work to get the hall back into shape, and hopefully now we can start using it as a place to meet, hold lectures, put on theatrical performances, and um, you know, be a space for the community to gather.
So they're like annual meeting or monthly
So,
meetings or weekly
um,
meetings?
monthly meetings, yeah. Sort of monthly meetings for the members, usually involve, a little bit of a lecture or game, and then also just meeting to conduct the business of the organization.
Right.
So a lot of organizing fundraisers and
Hmm.
activities.
Yeah.
The fair has been a lot of fun.
So is it
Yeah,
connected at
even
all with 4-H?
Um, we are trying, they're separate organizations. There is a 4-H in town. We've been trying to build more connections with them as well.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of you're talking about like judging and of different agricultural activities. Reminds me a lot of 4-H.
Yes. Yeah, it's like that.
do they do a scholarship? I think my mother's Grange did a scholarship fund also as well, like for local kids.
Um, Historically they have. That has fallen off as membership declined, but
Mm,
I
mm,
think I would definitely be interested in running that again, but
mm,
we need to rebuild a bit.
mm.
So it's but similarly, Simon, I like what you said about getting to know people by um, going out and doing work. There's one of the first things we did in town was I got involved in the local organization that is working to remove invasive species from a town park. So they meet once a month and cut back bittersweet and plant, they did seed flats of a whole bunch of natives and then planted those out, native plants. And so, that led to me meeting some folks who are on like the town conservation commission. And so that was a good way to get to know some folks as well.
Yeah, one of the first activities that we did here in the neighborhood was a work party, so to speak. Although with a bunch of kids, there's less work actually being done, but it's more in the spirit of things. We just did a spring cleanup. I went on Amazon and bought a bunch of cheap, trash grabber little arm extender things, and a couple contractor bags from the hardware store, and we organized all the kids in the neighborhood and just divvied up various blocks in the neighborhood, and spent a couple hours picking up trash, and then the kids ran around in the street riding their bicycles afterwards, and the folk, grown-ups drank some beer and that sort of thing, and that's like really easy to do. You're having a positive impact, and it's fun for the kids. And then you get to know other neighbors who weren't participating but were interested in what was going on, and you got to meet business owners who were appreciative of what we're doing. So that was like, in terms of impact, that was probably the easiest thing that we did that had the greatest amount of impact of all the things that we've done. And so you could definitely do something similar to that. And you have a lot more ground to cover in a rural area, of course. So you might need a little bit extra hands there, Simon. But that could be a way in which you can get your hands on contact information of families at school. So one of the things that you mentioned was like not knowing all the parents or even the kid's last name at your kid's school. Like that's definitely information that you have to get your hands on. And you can get your hands on that information by saying, hey, I'm organizing this event. It's a work party for cleaning up the park, or the landscaping around the town hall, or we're gonna do a trash pickup on Route 10 or whatever. I'd like to organize it around this kid's class. Like, can I have a list of the names from folks in the classroom? I can't imagine that you wouldn't be able to get that information.
Yeah,
you
it's
know
kind of a little bit. It's like personal information is kept very tightly nowadays. We used to have a phone book, right? So you could just like look
yeah.
up the kid's last name or and hope there's only 5 of that last name in your town. Um, yeah, we used to have a directory, like a school directory,
Hmm.
and you could opt out, of course, if you didn't want to be in it, but it would make things a lot easier to meet the parents, right? Like, of the kids in your class, of the kids in your kid's class.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think, having a farm works in your favor in a lot of ways, in terms of the events that you can organize, and certainly having an orchard uh, works even more in your favor. Other things that I thought of, the reason why I asked volunteer if you had a volunteer fire department in your town is, generally when you do, there's less bureaucracy to navigate, for lack of a better way of putting it. The volunteer fire department might be willing to do things that a full-time fire department wouldn't be willing to do. But, having like a New Year's Eve bonfire where everybody contributes their Christmas tree, and if you have it on your farm, assuming you have plenty of space and acreage to
Yeah.
do it, that could be a really fun and easy way to get to know your neighbors, to get to know folks in the fire department. Of course, they're going to want to be there, so they'll be able to try out their equipment to put it out at the end of the day. Any excuse for a
Yeah.
volunteer fire department to run a
Yeah.
hose, they're always going to jump at. That's another thing um, that comes to mind. Anytime the thing that we found is it just takes a tremendous amount of work. Like if it's something that you want, you have to be willing to put the work into it and organizing.
Yeah.
And that part's not easy. You have to do a lot of outreach. You have to get your hands on the contact information. You have to be persistent. You have to put in some of your own funds. But we found that it's always worth it. Another thing that we did was a New Year's Eve party. We did since we all have young kids under 10, give or take, we did like a 9 p.m. ball drop. We rigged up
Yeah.
a fake ball to hang from a tree in the neighborhood, and we did a round robin party where you could only do this responsibly, at least in a walking neighborhood, where we spent like an hour at everybody's house who wanted to participate. So everybody prepared some snacks at their house, and everybody showed up. You had 30-40 people in our house, and a million kids are running around. You trash the place, and then you go to your neighbor's house and do it all over again. And that was so much fun. Obviously that you have to be the benefit of being in close proximity with your neighbors there, but certainly if
Yeah, it's
you're
a farming town with not close proximity.
yeah.
Every person within walking distance, just about, is a family member. It's
Yeah.
that kind of poverty. But where I grew up was more of like a neighborhood, like you're describing, suburban neighborhood. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, my brother moved back home. He lives a few doors down from my folks now, and he's trying to, he's very much in a similar predicament as you. He had spent time in San Francisco, he had spent time in Boston. Being able to socialize and mingle within your community was a lot easier when you saw
Hmm.
them every day. Walk into the
Yeah.
mailbox or something.
Yeah.
And so he moved back. There's obviously much less people, and there's much less people his age, but enough. And he's sought them out. Folks that have kids, like he has kids, and he's put together like little small Christmas party get-togethers, little kids book swap type events. But those things take work, right? And you have to be willing
Yeah.
to host and do the organizing. But you have to do that stuff, otherwise you're on an island
Yeah, it
without
definitely
any
feels a
interaction.
bit like on an island that people like arrive and leave,
Yeah,
spend
yeah,
an hour, and people are very friendly, of course. Yeah.
yeah. But you're not building the deep connections that
Yeah.
you want to build. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 What about is there like a healthy PTO, parent teacher organization in your
Yeah,
school
there is a
district? Like what
PTO
others?
organization at the school, and that's something
Yeah,
we've talked about. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I've
yeah.
never
Because
been part of a PTO though. Yeah.
my brother ran for the school committee. That's another thing that we could talk about that you can do is just running for different town positions or local. Kara mentioned right away they ask to be an officer of the Grange, which those institutions need um, need members and need leadership. So, joining school committees, planning boards, the local VFW and the like. Again,
Yeah, I
because
felt a bit like taking a back seat to that at the moment, just because I've only been in this town 3 years, really. Like, I'm the 4th generation on this farm, but, I feel like I need to learn more about the people around me and be respectful for what they want. Um, yeah, the school board is quite heated at the moment too, so I also don't really wanna step into that.
yeah, I can imagine.
Well,
Yeah, yeah.
in our town, there's a lot. As I said, started showing up at this invasive plants workshop, and that's organized by a member of the town conservation commission, which is appointed, not elected, and they needed people. And so I started showing up to meetings, and there was an empty seat, and so I was able to join. So you don't necessarily need to start at the most heated, although when you're talking, even in small town politics, you do have to organize, you have to affiliate with a party. So that means you have to choose one side or the other. But in a small town, um, when things get national, they can get heated, but mostly if you're just focusing on the um, items before you, people are generally pretty collaborative.
Yeah.
So like those sorts of town commissions, there's an effort right now in my town to look at, how the town center is working. How do we want that to develop? And so people have been organizing meetings. There was last weekend just a walk through at the hall, at the senior center, and local restaurants had donated food, and there were things you could react to, feedback you could provide for, how do we want the town center to develop? So, there are people organizing things like that. So you can avoid the heated things, although, um, you know, how the town center develops people have strong opinions about that too, but
Yeah,
there
for
are
me,
ways.
it's like, what's being allowed to be taught in school and things like that. And maybe my perspective is different than my town's perspective, or people that have been here a lot longer than I have. And I feel like, while my opinion is important, I'm moving into their town.
Yeah. Oh, no, that is important. But
Yeah.
even just, I guess the point I'm trying to make is just showing up and learning what people are saying.
Hmm.
Can be
Yeah.
attending meetings can be important as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, just being interested. You don't have to be opinion. I mean, I can certainly sympathize with your position. I mean, I've been here now for we've owned this home since 2015, but I've been in the area much longer than that, and I've yet to vote in a local election because I just feel like it still is not my place. So I certainly can understand, those types of feelings that you have, that, while you live here and you've lived here for some time now, you don't feel, necessarily rightful to express your opinion. And I guess I would applaud you for that, because there's plenty of people who will move to a place and throw their opinions around very strongly, and try to make change, which I personally have talked about some on this podcast and on Twitter. And, I think that
Yeah.
that is the wrong approach. But it shouldn't be what prevents you from at least making connections, and
Right.
being interested, right?
No, I found that you can find anything to you can find something to be connected with someone, any person, there's something that you have in common with them. And
Absolutely.
that helps to bridge that gap for sure. Yeah.
I'm curious, are there any of your, friends from childhood or growing up or high school that are back, are still in town, that you reestablish connections with?
Not many, no. Some are in the town that I grew up in, and some live in the town that I now work in, my day job. But because of, moving to the next town over. There aren't any in this town specifically.
Hmm,
Yeah.
hmm, hmm.
They're all really close together. They're small towns, I could name probably 4 or 5 of them within 10 miles kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yep,
Yeah.
yep.
That's the other thing is like, we aren't the biggest town. There's a much bigger town, and a lot of people go there to do their social activities, including myself.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm, mhm.
So that complicates things, or in some ways it broadens your network too.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's fair. I mean, having regional relationships is just fine too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's really close, to be fair. Yeah,
Yeah.
10 minutes, 15 minutes. Yeah, I like the movie night idea, but yeah, and some other friends of the podcast have talked about, permaculture related series, or, food forest related series, but also we want to get the parents, right? Like for us with kids. Um so trying to get kids to want to attend, or parents to bring their kids to attend, is also important.
And so you said you already do some hosting of farm tours and stuff
Yeah,
like
we
that?
do like school related farm tours. Like teachers can sign up, and bring their kids to do farm tours here in the fall. We have like you pick pumpkins and you pick apples. Yeah.
Mhm. What about
And
like cider pressing?
yeah, we have cider pressing as well. Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah, and the kids love to see that. If they are here the day that we're pressing, that's a big deal. I like to
Yeah,
understand where they're it's important. I'm a big advocate of making sure that people understand where their food comes from. I know I talk a lot about that on Twitter.
100%, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big problem. Kids, I mean, not for our town specifically, but you hear a lot of like people not understanding where their food comes from.
Hmm, hmm.
Hmm.
What other ways can you envision of getting the town interested or interacting with your
Yeah.
property? Like, is there enough property to do like hikes or wildlife tours or anything like that?
Yeah, probably not. We've talked about possibly cross country skiing, like kind of
Hmm,
event, out of our barn, like a warming place.
hmm,
That's
hmm.
something I've talked with a colleague about who's really into cross country skiing, so that could be a possibility. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. It's not that
Yeah,
big, but it's pretty big.
yeah. Tom Ruby, who is a friend of the podcast,
Yeah, of course.
I visited Tom's little homestead in Kentucky a year ago now, March of last year. And I think the first time I discovered Tom on Twitter was a post that he made that I don't know if it went viral, but it somehow got into my feed. And he had hosted a ladies walking club on his homestead. He has beautiful property. He's sort of an amateur botanist almost. He's very integrated in sort of all the different types of plants and herbs that grow on his farm, and then he curates it very, very well, and he has all these networks of trails that lead out through his property. And he hosted this ladies walking club, which apparently was this club that exists locally to him, which I thought was the coolest thing. But folks who have land can certainly open up their land to folks who don't, or are just
Hmm.
interested in seeing other people's properties. And I thought that was like an awesome idea, whether it's for you or anybody else listening who has plenty of property, who probably has, paths, trails and walking paths. Open your property up to other people to enjoy is a really great, easy, light lift thing to do to interact with your neighbors. I just thought that was like the greatest idea ever.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. We do encourage people to walk. They'll come to the farm store, and we encourage people. You could just walk to the pumpkin patch, or you could just walk to the raspberry patch. Yeah, people are like, oh, it's right up there. Okay, but yeah, it's interesting. Maybe I should be pushing tours more small tours, once a week or something, and just for people to enjoy the property and learn more about the farm as well, and
Mm.
learn about the people as the community.
Yeah, and then in terms of like other resources that you might have to offer, like, do you have, I'm assuming maybe that you have, or you could certainly do grafting, or
Yeah, we've
if you
talked
have
about grafting. Yeah.
yeah, or seedlings that you can offer up and help plant throughout the rest of the town, like little, little things like that where you can share,
Yeah.
share some of your assets, so to speak, right?
Yeah, one thing we do is we do donate quite a bit of food to the local food banks, so that helps build community and getting to know the people who run those food banks. Yeah, that's a big one. We also do a bunch of landscaping at the local cemetery.
Hmm.
One of my
Hmm.
aunts who's on the part of the farm, she she volunteers for the cemetery.
Yeah, or if there's other local trail systems. So, back home, the snowmobile club is kind of a big deal, snowmobiling, and less so now the way the climate's going, it's kind of become more of like a four wheeling and, what they call side by sides. A lot of the trail network is now being used by those, but, there's a lot of activity at the town scale to keep those trails open. And so there's a lot of work parties to do trail maintenance, to repair bridges, build bridges, to cut back, trees that are encroaching on the trail, to remove logs that have fallen across, So while it may not be on your property, like I'm sure if you're living in a
Yeah.
rural area, there's opportunities to do work elsewhere too, right?
Yeah, there's the Finger Lakes Land Trust,
Hmm.
which they do a lot of trail building. Yeah, and I have volunteered with them before. That's another good resource. Land trusts are a huge part of this part of the country.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's good fun too.
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it
yeah. I'm
needs
a
to
big
be.
fan of work parties.
Yeah, it needs to be fun. It needs to be
Yeah,
fun. That's fun is a great evangelizer, right? That's Neil
yeah,
Clark's saying. And that's a good way to get kids interested. Because that's how I look at. That's really the mission of all of this, right? Like to get kids engaged in the work, to get kids engaged and bought into their community. Like in order to get their attention, it needs to be fun. Um, and that's what builds, sort of their lasting commitment. So there
yeah.
needs
You're
to be
reminding
always needs to be an element
me.
of fun.
We helped local park state park had a work day, and we showed up and volunteered, for 4 hours, and there's like a pizza party afterwards, and my son had an absolute blast at that. It was really, and there's a lot of community, a lot of faces that I knew as well. So yeah,
Mm,
that was a huge project we did last spring now, I guess. Yeah, probably
mm,
coming up on and doing it again this year. I would definitely recommend people do that at their local state parks. There's usually a park, like friends of the park, that put together work parties like that.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah. Have you thought about becoming involved in 4-H with your kids and with the farm?
I haven't with since becoming an adult, but as a kid, I was my
Mm.
I obviously have a horticulture background. Both my parents are horticulturists, and so I grew a lot of houseplants and got involved with 4-H because they,
Mm.
uh, judging houseplants happens to be a big part of 4-H and the 4-H fair. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a great
talking.
4-H camp locally as well,
Yeah.
like a overnight camp that I spent a lot of time at as a kid.
Yeah. So just talking with the woman in town who organizes the 4-H, she said she's always looking for people to teach. So given your skills, that might be something, and a way to bring a kid's work party to your farm even. Maybe,
Yeah,
could it be, because as you say, the challenge is if you have your own land you need to take care of, and that's taking up a lot of your time and energy on weekends, it then becomes a challenge to um volunteer
Yeah,
elsewhere.
last
So
year I
that's,
invited a friend of the podcast to
yeah,
come, who's a local, to come and plant trees with us. It was really great fun.
yeah, no, it's, I think it's that's been a struggle for us, is like trying to we're on the more introverted end, so you have limited energy to spend, and so how do you use it um most effectively to build those relationships? And when you have things you need to get done and a full-time job, that's the struggle, is the balance
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
That's where for us it's been about the kids, like when because we don't have family around, if we don't go out and seek and find other support mechanisms, it's all us and the kids all the time. And so, if we want to do something to get out of the house, it really needs to have a kid component to it. And so
absolutely.
things like work parties and social events and that sort of thing, it needs to have a special carve out for the kids to entertain them and keep them occupied. And it's way more easier for 5 sets of parents to watch 20 kids than it is one set of parent to watch two kids for too long of a time. You know what I mean? Uh, um,
They start to
so
entertain each other
they
too.
start to entertain themselves
Yeah.
until they start to burn out eventually at the end of the night, and then it's time to go home, and that gives you a convenient excuse to wrap it up as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But that's really been the central focus for us. We just got out of Easter weekend. We've organized now for 3 or 4 years neighborhood Easter egg hunt. We had like 12 houses that participated in the Easter egg hunt. We do neighborhood Halloween parades, which is always a lot of fun. We did the New Year's Eve party that we talked about. We do the friends dinner, especially summer evenings. We're coming up on summer. We'll do like Friday evening friends dinner. We'll just order pizza for the kids, and the adults will hang out and drink beer, and kids will run around in the street and have a good time. Movie nights. That's the other thing. Like I keep going back to that, but last year I bought like a cheapo $80 projector and like a $20 fire stick, and I'll bring it around the neighborhood. Whoever's house we happen to be hanging out at, we'll set up the projector and throw a sheet up on the side of their house and have a kids movie night. So that's like really good, cheap fun. Block parties, again, given just our logistical setup here, block parties are really easy for us. One of my neighbors in a blues band, and so he, gets his band together and plays on the front porch, and everybody brings a dish, and because it's a neighborhood setup and it's a band playing in the neighborhood, people come from out of the woodwork, and so we get to meet folks from around the block and the next block's over. So that has been a lot of fun as well. And then you know it is important too to have non kid centered community as well, and that's where sort of your hobbies might come into play. I have too many hobbies. I love hobbies, but getting together to work on a friend's car or go mountain biking with friends. You know, Organizing around hobbies is another good way to start to get out and among your community. And that's where I hate to say it, but things like Facebook and stuff like that are still relevant. Like using Facebook to find local mountain biking groups or create a local mountain biking group, or those are some tools that you can use at your disposal as well. Those are just
Yeah.
things that I had on my list to rattle off.
Last fall we held like a friendsgiving in our tasting room in our barn, and yeah, that really made me realize, that was what made me realize, like, oh, a lot of people, you just get them together
Hmm.
and have a
Yeah.
reason to get them together. um and between the six of us or whatever, we can all bring six friends together. Well, now you got 40 people, or um and that was really good. That was a really good event. And it was in our space, but we weren't like selling anything. It was just to get people together and bring a dish to pass and have a good time and introduce people to new people, networking. Um, yeah, that was a really good eye opener for us, was that event. I
Mm.
think probably should do a spring version of that.
It sounds like it. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the thing that's important too, we've found at least, is to introduce like a level of regularity. Like you need sort of regularly scheduled events
Yeah.
to help keep that interest.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, the little friends dinners, mini block parties that we do. Like in the summertime, it's every Friday afternoon. 4:30, 5 o'clock. People get out of work and school, send the kids down the street. When we see there's enough kids, then the adults come out, and then we start to hang out, and that's become our thing. And every Halloween, it's the Halloween parade. Every Easter, it's the Easter egg hunt. You kind of have to enforce the regular cadence, because then it becomes, that's what creates a level of expectation. Like, hey, when's that party? You haven't sent us the invite yet.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where, that I think is sort of half the battle. Like, if something is not already, if the structure is not already built out, it's an uphill battle. And that's why so many people gravitate towards church. Like, in the parish community, like people are getting together regularly every Sunday. That's just what you do. And so you're seeing the same faces every Sunday, and you can't help but create community ties that way.
Right.
But if you're not religious, there isn't. Then you're talking about other institutions, again, school board meetings, PTO meetings, local VFW events, and that sort of thing. Like, the more regularity there can be,
Yeah.
the more you can build on what you have. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's a great point of just create the expectation and follow through, and eh, you do just have to keep putting energy into it, though. I don't know that I've cracked the code, but um it is good to be part of a community. It's good to be involved and um build friendships around common goals.
yeah, and I think you're fine. I'm sure you guys can
Yeah.
all relate. Like, every time we do get together, we say, "Oh, we should do this more often." Even if we already are doing it, like on a weekly or biweekly basis. Like, that's just an inevitable response that you'll hear. We should do this more often. Well, yeah, we should do this more often. Let's do it
Yeah.
more often. And it takes that level of sort of commitment and follow up. Like, all right, this time next week. Because it's too easy to find excuses if you don't
Yeah.
sort of set that expectation, right?
Yeah. I've become part of a small food forest uh, group who meets every other Sunday.
Oh,
And
cool.
the other day, my wife said, like, is this every week? And you're right. Like, if you don't show up and it doesn't become regular, you won't show up.
Yeah, it fizzles out
Yeah.
pretty fast. What
Right.
what what type of stuff? Like, do you meet at somebody else's property
Oh no,
each
it's all
session? Or
virtual.
virtual? Okay. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's all on Zoom. Um, yeah, and there's a note taker and publish the notes at the end. It's been really
Yep.
great. Met lots
Yep.
of good people that way too, and you don't realize, yeah, how close. There's people probably right in your town who are interested, or the next town over. Um, yeah,
Yeah, that's where you can get into sort of regional events as well.
yeah,
If you can find yourself a network of other orchards or other you pick
yeah. Let's all
farms,
meet up
and you
in
get
so
to
and
know each
so's
other.
place.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and every other week you're meeting at somebody else's property, and then you can start talking about work shares, right? Hey, I need to prune my trees. Let's meet here at my place this weekend, and I'll buy a couple extra pruning shears, and we'll go from there.
yeah.
Um, I'm trying to think of other things
To
like,
creating, yeah, what you're describing is really, I don't know if it's a generational problem, or like sharing the load of everyone's farm. You know come to this farm and do this job. It just feels very siloed now. It doesn't feel like that's how farming is done anymore. At
Hmm.
least not in this part of the world. Unless there's like a horrible catastrophe that happens, and so everyone, brings their tractor and pitches in to help a family,
Hmm.
like a barn raising or sort of situation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's too. I mean, I believe it 100%. It's too bad. It's too bad that that's the case because, yeah, I
People are
mean,
just
many,
so busy and so thin, pushed
yeah,
so thin on their own farms, they can't even take the time to go help
yeah,
other people.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a
And
shame.
but there are plenty of people who don't have farms that I'm sure would be willing to help too. If you could somehow organize those folks and
Yeah.
do a rotational work party type situation. Um, because yeah, I can empathize with that. Like
Yeah.
a lot of farmers are aging too. That's another
Yeah.
problem, and have a hard time keeping up. And you want to see them continue on with their business, and they need the support.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other things, I'm
All
just looking at
right.
my list here, like
Yeah.
other things that, especially we're in the springtime. So I would definitely go back to, the trash pickup, spring cleanup, Earth Day type situation is awesome. Like spring cleanup in general, one of the things that we're talking about in the neighborhood is just like going in on a dumpster together and do like a full blown clean out the basement type situation. But, extrapolating that into a more rural setting, like setting up a town wide yard sale. The town that I'm from, or neighboring town from where I'm from, has like a big one every Memorial Day, and they publish a map. So everybody's having their own yard sale, but they publish a map where all the yard sales are at. I've heard other towns where they do like a community yard sale on the common itself, so everybody brings their junk in a pickup truck and sets it up, booth style. You can do like
Yeah, we have
I've
a
heard of.
huge, huge yard sale. Uh, yeah, it's many miles long here
Yeah.
every year.
There's some good stuff
I
there.
don't know. I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out where I live, but I'm not gonna I'm not gonna say it out loud.
um,
Yeah, it's a
book
good
swap
one.
book swaps is something that the local church does a bunch, but you don't have to do it at the church. Doing a book swap. My mother used to do like scrap swaps, like for ladies that were into, or anybody that's into quilting. They would do scrap swaps.
Yeah, I could
That's
see like a
another.
budwood swap. That'd be a good
Yeah,
one. I've seen that
yeah, yeah,
before.
yeah, yeah.
Come
That's a good
swap
call.
all your apple budwood.
Yep, that's a good call. Things like that, again, encourage people to contribute a little something in some way, and get to check out their neighbor's property, right? Come and see what kind of good junk you got in your barn for sale. That's all good stuff. That's all good
Yeah, I
stuff.
like that one. That's a good one.
Trying to think of what other ground we didn't cover. I think I hit everything
Yeah,
on my list here.
I have everything I think we've talked about on my list as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to summarize, like, yeah, I mean, there's things like in your situation where you have something to offer while staying put, right? Have people come to you, but you can get a long way with that. But I think there's no substitution for also going out there and plugging yourself in to those networks that already exist. Um, some of them, or many of them may not be an ideal fit, but that's okay. I mean, I think you kind of have to extend yourself a little bit. And I'm saying you, but I don't mean
Yeah,
you or anybody in your situation, or myself
and
for that matter. I've certainly gone
everyone
to
out
events
there.
where my heart's not into it, but that's okay because I want to meet folks and get to know folks and meet them where they're at.
Yeah,
So
maybe learn a new skill that you're not
yeah,
comfortable with. Yeah,
yeah, you have to,
step outside
yeah,
your comfort zone.
yeah, you have to put in the
Yeah,
work. And while online groups such as us, we're all meeting here and building online community, that's all great. But that's no substitution either for the real thing. And you can
Yeah,
use online groups like this to create in-person groups as well. So
absolutely.
yeah, that's my closing thought, at least.
The way I've heard it put is, don't be afraid to be weird and go first. You just have to put yourself out there, which, is advice I'm working to put into practice myself.
Hmm. Yeah, that's good advice.
That's
Like,
yeah,
yeah, be the first, because I'm sure you guys can relate. Like, there's plenty of times where somebody's come to me with an idea. Hey, I'm having this event. I'm like, oh, that's great. I would love to go to that event. Like, but I didn't have the gumption to do it. There's people out there, I think, is the point, like waiting for a fun way to engage with their neighbors, but don't have the bandwidth to organize themselves, or just don't have the motivation. And
yeah,
if you take on that motivation, like, they're gonna come. They will come to you. I've gone to them in many instances, and I'm sure you guys have as well. So you kind of,
yeah.
that's a great point, Carrie. You don't be afraid to be the first.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for joining us today in this.
It's
Absolutely.
great.
It was great discussion. I don't know that we
Yeah,
solved
great.
solved anything, but that's okay. That's not the
Lots of
point
great
here.
ideas for everybody out there. Get out there and work out with their own community. I think that's great. Thanks.
Thanks
Absolutely.
for thanks for getting us together. It's good to
Absolutely.
talk to
Just
you.
great meeting you, Simon.
Yeah, great to meet you too. Take care.